Hi everyone. Good morning. Thank you for kindly waiting while we in the Zoom waiting room. Good morning, good evening if you're joining us from the other side of the world. While we're still waiting for some of our other colleagues to join us for this webinar, um, again, this is on strategic planning for renewable energy and energy efficiency projects, we invite you to join the Renew community of practice so you can engage with like-minded colleagues from around Southeast Asia. You can simply scan the QR code there on your screen using your mobile device, and it will take you to the community of practice where you can interact with your other colleagues, introduce yourselves, expand your network, and gain access to other opportunities related to renewable energy. So yeah, that QR code links to leads to our community of practice over there on LinkedIn. So we'll have again, if you're just joining us for this webinar, thank you for setting aside some time from your day to join us for this capacity building session on strategic planning for renewable energy and energy efficiency projects will start in just a very short while, a minute or two. But while we're waiting for the rest of our colleagues to join us, we invite you to join the Renew community of practice by scanning that QR code on your screen. That leads you to the community of practice over on LinkedIn, where you're free to introduce yourself, where you're from, your interest in renewable energy. And by joining this community of practice, you get first access to exclusive Renew knowledge products, Renew events, as well as other opportunities for collaboration as they arise in the future. Over in this group, you can also begin and participate in discussions related to renewable energy. So if you have experience regarding implementing RE projects uh, in your organization or in your city, uh, we'd of course love to hear your experiences. So I think we've reached critical mass for this webinar. So just a few reminders. If you desire captions, they should be enabled on your screen. You can just click more and then the show captions button. You can translate this webinar into the language that you are preferring. But just for everyone's information, this webinar will be conducted majority in English, maybe with some Malaysian context every now and then, as we are focusing on the um, Malaysian context for this webinar. The Q&A button is available. The Q&A function is available, I should say. Should you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to input your questions there. And we've allotted some time at the end of this webinar to answer some of them. You can also use the chat button and the react icons to let us know how you're engaging with this webinar so far. So with that short introduction in mind, I'd love to pass it on over to my colleague from ICLEI Southeast Asia, Rick Marfiga. Rick is one of our managers in ICLEI Southeast Asia, and he'll introduce who ICLEI is, as well as talk a little bit about the Renew project. Rick, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for that. So I'll just share my screen. Okay, hope every one of you can see it. So okay, so I'm Rick Barfiga. I'm the manager for ICLEI Southeast Asia Secretariat and also a focal person for Malaysia for this Renew Southeast Asia project. Okay, ICLEI Southeast Asia is based in the Philippines, but we are also engaging and implementing several projects most of the Southeast Asian cities and the countries. Okay, so first I introduce you what ICLEI. So ICLEI, we are a global network of more than 2,500 local and regional governments, and we have a diverse team of global experts, 22 offices across 125 countries. And all of our networks and membership are all committed to sustainable urban development. ICLEI, it means International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. We are founded in 1990, but we are not using this uh, more. It's because of the broader mandate for sustainability issues. We changed our logo, and then we became the ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability in 2023. These are our offices globally. Our main office or secretariat is located in Bonn, Germany, as well as other offices in Europe. That includes the Berlin office, the Brussels office, the European Secretariat. And then we have offices in North America, in Canada, and the US. And then in South America, that includes the Mexico office, the Colombia office, the Argentina office, and the Secretariat. So um, in Africa, as well as in South Asia, India, in Oceania, in Melbourne, Australia, in East Asia Secretariat, from the four countries in Korea, in China, in Beijing, in Japan, as well as in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. And then for Southeast Asia, our office is located in Manila, Philippines, and we also have a project office in Jakarta, Indonesia. So for Southeast Asia, we are all implementing projects in the region, as well as all the other countries. We previously have offices in Laos and Vietnam for project specific implementation. Okay. So yeah, this is the Manila office and the Indonesia project office that we have control of. Okay, so ICLEI for the Southeast Asia Secretariat, since we are implementing this here in these countries for 20 years in the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. Our membership that includes also the network of cities in the Philippines and in Indonesia. And then for that we have several membership, full members, around 38 in the Philippines, as well as more countries in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. So what we do is we connect local governments to different resources. We develop knowledge products, organize learning activities, do consultations, researches, and then mentoring activities and building institutional capacities for both, not just at the local level, but also going up to the national or federal level. And then also we do program and project management. For all of these activities and our offices from different parts of the globe, we are following these five pathways: the low emission development, the circular development, the nature-based development, the resilient development, equitable, and people-centered development. So these five pathways are integrated to each other, and this is what we are following in how we are implementing and engaging with our colleagues, partners, and networks. So we're doing this, and these five pathways also is integrated to the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. So basically, if you have more questions about it, if you want to join the network, among others, so just click on the contact details that will be shown later on. So with this, and then as we move on to the presentation, we go on to the uh, Bring Southeast Asia project. So The Renew Southeast Asia project empowers the local and regional governments to drive sustainable energy transition, to scale up renewable energy, and improve energy efficiency. So for this project, this is implemented right now in 3 countries in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. And we also have deep dive cities in each of those countries. For Indonesia, it's Yogyakarta. For Malaysia, it's Sangtuajaya, Melaka. And then in Thailand, it's Chiang Mai. And for the activities that we did for the past a few months, we did capacity building, knowledge exchange with peers, multi-level collaboration from the different levels and sectors of the government, and to provide awareness to the different stakeholders. So, and for the deep dive cities and regions, this is on the increased visibility on the regional and global stage. The provide guidance, tools, knowledge, and networking to implement the renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions, and to lead and advocate to strengthen national and regional frameworks to benefit peer cities and regions. So that's it. And as mentioned by Chris earlier, you may join the Renew and the Clay community space on LinkedIn to exchange with the peers and energy-related in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. Do workshops on renewable energy policies, finance and technologies, the knowledge products on sustainable procurement, with energy permitting, energy, and there's the cooling, and more knowledge products, as well as join the global community of peers through the 100% renewable cities and regions initiatives for knowledge exchange networking and global visibility. So just follow on that website link, the iclei.org/100re. So you may contact me on this email address. And previously we had our training in Melaka for the last month. Previous to this online activity, we did a training on the basics of renewable energy and energy efficiency, as well as on strategic planning on renewable energy and energy efficiency. So before we all proceed with this activity, I would like to introduce our facilitator for this training, Ms. Ayu Abdullah, the Executive Director for. So Ayu, take it away.
Thanks so much, Rick. I'm going to take over and share my slides now.
Okay.
Is this, can everyone see my slides?
Sorry, I think we see not the presentation itself, but we see the full Microsoft interface, the full PowerPoint interface. It's not on slide view.
Is it on slide view now?
Yeah, that works. Thank you.
Is it, okay, does it still remain on slide view? I'm just testing.
No, it returns to the
okay.
PowerPoint interface.
Okay, okay, all right. So this one then, right?
Yeah, yes, that works.
Okay, great. All right. So good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. And I see that actually it's a really diverse crowd from all over the world, which is super exciting. My name is Ayu, and the way that we're going to do this is I would love it to be interactive and like a discussion. And I know that sometimes that's difficult to do on an online platform, but we'll try our best. So if you can put questions in the chat, we'll try and check in every now and then. But basically, the main flow of this session will be Rick just kindly gave us an introduction into the Renew C project. And then basically what I'm going to go into for today's presentation is really about developing an RE strategy for local city councils and governments, and then how we actually move that from strategy to implementation. So I'm going to go ahead. But before that, I think this is where Chris, if you could help me with the poll questions, this is kind of where I wanted to start with some questions just to get a sense of where everyone is joining us from and what your background is. Okay, so go ahead and fill that in. While that's happening, let me just try something real quick.
We've reached half of our participants have answered the poll. Do you want to keep the answers coming, Ayu, or can we end the poll now?
You can end the poll now. Is there a way to, all right. I'm seeing the results. I think it very quickly disappeared. Oh, there it is again. Okay, so we have 80% of our participants are actually not in Malaysia, which is welcome, everybody. And then out of participants in Malaysia, the majority are in Malacca. Hello, colleagues. And then some in the Klang Valley, and then joining us from Sabah, Sarawak. So welcome, everyone. So let me just reshare my screen here. Okay. You should be able to see the screen right now. Great. So let's begin with the presentation. So our presentation is going to begin with a section on developing an RE strategy or renewable energy strategy. Since considering that most of our participants are actually from outside the country, I'm going to maybe do a little bit of Bahasa Malaysia, but mostly in English. And so, saya akan cuba terangkan dalam bahasa Inggeris, tapi bila sesuai, mungkin saya akan selitkan sikit lah, sedikit dalam bahasa Melayu. Okay. So beginning with a RE strategy, we want to look at how to set targets and how to build a roadmap for achieving those targets. And what we want to cover right now is basically how to develop a plan that works in practice. So many cities or councils want to do renewable energy or energy efficiency, but it's very important to begin with a strategy. And many times with projects, when projects fail, it's because, the strategy or the plan was not necessarily aligned with some realities and things in practice. And so we want to really be helping everyone think very clearly, first of all, about how do we set a clear direction, what is achievable, very importantly, and then how do we move from, ideas to projects, right? So why is it important? Basically, right now, we want to start with how to set sustainable energy transition or set targets, SET targets. And why is this important, really? And it's because targets are really what guide our action. And if we don't set clear targets, we risk making plans that don't really lead anywhere or that no one is accountable for because we're not very clear about our scope and our roles and, within the boundaries of a project, what are we trying to do? And so some important questions to really think about is, are we picking a scope that we can control, most of all, most importantly? Are we picking sectors where we can make impact? And are our targets time bound so that we can work within our means and also measure progress? And without this clarity, it's extremely important to come up with efforts that add up to a meaningful energy transition. And so, like I mentioned, the first of all is to pick a scope. And so for local councils or governments, this basically, you can either focus on government operations, basically what's within your control. So are they your buildings? Are they your street lights, your fleet? Or you can also go community-wide, which in this case would include everything within the authority of the local governance, including private sector and, local communities and residents. Number two, secondly, in thinking about how to set targets would be to pick a sector. You might focus on sectors that contribute the most to your emissions, your energy emissions. And typically we break that down according to electricity use, buildings, transportation, heating, or cooling, which is, very relevant in Southeast Asia. And so electricity use would be basically power consumption and use. Buildings would be energy consumption within buildings. Transportation is anything that is to do with the transportation sector. And then heating or cooling, basically any consumption around any heating use or cooling use. And thirdly, in setting your targets here would be to adopt and act. And so in this situation, in this step here, it's where we look at setting time-bound goals. For example, a 50% renewable energy capacity by 2030 or 100% renewable energy capacity by 2050. Now, it's important to think about these targets because they must connect to people and realities on the ground, finance, funding options, technology, nature or your natural environment and built environment, as well as it needs to be in line with your national level goals as well. And so for Malaysia, this is critical to think about our net zero targets and our NETR, which is our National Energy Transition Roadmap. Okay. So once we've set our targets, and basically it's, to basically guide our action, right? Like we mentioned, it's important to then think about the roadmap as well. And why does the roadmap matter? It's basically how we break down the targets and our ambitions into steps that we can actually implement. And so, you have to ask yourself as you're thinking about the roadmap, do we have the political support and buy-in? Do we know how we're going to gather data? Are we ready to model and plan for different scenarios? And very critically as well, who is responsible for both the development of the roadmap and also developing the plan itself? So basically, this is, what we think is a step-by-step guide and process into how you create and develop a roadmap. And so first is to act and mobilize in terms of building the political ambition and securing commitment. and then the data collection around gathering the information so that you know where to start from. And then we go to step 3, which is analyze and develop model scenarios and form the roadmap. And then we move into action with the implementation strategies and implementation plan. So this isn't a checklist. It's flexible and can be adapted and adopted into your local context. So this is just structured into phases to guide, local governments into the process of developing a roadmap. So breaking down those steps further. So that was like a high level view of it. And now we go into the steps further. So this is really about setting the vision and building out the stakeholders and the team that is going to carry this through. And you need to define what you want to achieve. And you need to map your key stakeholders, who is important to bring in, as early as possible into your roadmap and your implementation. Setting up the institutional arrangements and identifying your core team. This is very important because, nobody works in silos, and we need to have sufficient coordination across different departments and stakeholders in the community. So this is really the first step, because nothing moves without leadership. And the political commitment that you have really gives you the permission, priority for action. And I think some things to kind of questions to think about as you walk through this is, looking around you as well. Who in your council is championing the cause for renewable energy and energy efficiency already? And then, it's important to map out the stakeholders, but in mapping out the stakeholders, it's important to identify who can support the roadmap, who are allies, and who may be people that you need to bring around or is not completely on board just yet, but you need to actually work with very, very strongly to align with your priorities. And then do you already have a core team, or is this a task that you still need to do, or is this a task for somebody else? And all of these things need to be understood. So I think the key thing here is that it really establishes a unified vision among all the stakeholders, right? And you really need to craft a vision statement, forming all the institutional arrangements, conducting, like I mentioned, the mapping and all of this. This is all very critical, because without this, there's really no way to realize a project without having these key elements in place. Success factors. So once you have strong leadership, you need to prioritize the initiatives, and this is important to get really to get support and buy-in from all levels in government. It also helps to remove roadblocks, making it easier to integrate climate and energy plans into your overall strategy. It also is important to help break the siloed thinking of everybody working in their own spaces. Interdepartmental cooperation is extremely important to get these projects moving. And then it ensures your energy goals are really aligned with your communities as well. So, I wanted to mention here actually two key sort of examples from our local city councils. One is in Penang with, there was a solar streetlight program that had very strong political commitment and buy-in from the mayor's office and also the local engineering departments, and that was very successful. And then I think also the Malacca with their low carbon initiatives has shown, we heard in last month in May, we had a workshop in person, and they were presenting how everybody kind of came together to carry out a low carbon roadmap. And so that's actually kind of worth mentioning and shouting out to our colleagues that, these roadmaps are very critical. And the political commitment was very key in carrying out those projects. Now, step 2 is where this is a major challenge for renewable energy or energy efficiency projects. But it's actually one of the more critical steps, because without data for baseline assessments, you actually don't know where you're starting from. So it's very critical to do this to get a starting point. So, the data collection is to build the starting point and baseline. And the baseline is important to help you, one, track your progress over time, and then two, be able to get data to identify the biggest opportunities for improvement. And three, it will help you set targets that are realistic because you know where you're starting from, and you also have a sense of your opportunities. And so, you want to set ambitious targets, but they also have to be very realistic. And so in thinking about what kind of data do we really need, well, we definitely need data around energy demand. So how much energy is your city using? Where are they using it? Are they using it in buildings? Are they using it in streetlights? What is a lot versus a little? So kind of trying to understand the relative demand and patterns as well. And then energy efficiency. So are your current systems efficient or not? Is there anywhere where you see some wastage in energy? So this is very critical as well, right? Existing supply generation. Where is the energy coming from? Where is the electricity coming from? Are you already using a lot of renewables? How much of your supply is currently on fossil fuels? So this is quite critical as well. And then GIS, which is, geospatial data, so location data. This is also to place like where everything is geographically, and then where are your big energy consumers located as well. So this is also for your planning purposes to know, what is a lot, what is a little bit. So this is really critical for that. Cost data, how much are you currently spending and paying right now? This helps also build up the business case for change, knowing where the expenses are, and where, again, a lot versus a little, which is very critical when you're thinking of data collection. Environmental and external impacts, where's your biggest carbon footprint right now? Are these areas also sensitive to environmental damage? That's also very critical to be thinking about. And then policy data. What local policies versus state level policies versus federal or national level policies already support, or are some current constraints in terms of what you can and cannot do? So that's also very critical to collect information about policy as well. So yeah, so I think, just kind of recapping very quickly in terms of key questions to be asking yourselves is, do we know where most of our energy is currently being consumed? Are we already collecting any of this data actually? So going out to think about any stakeholders that you are in touch with that are already collecting this data within, it can also be within your councils, engineering department, planning units, finance departments. What kind of data are they already collecting? And this is again, coming back to the earlier slide on breaking the silos. And then who can help us collect the data, and how do we make sure that it is sufficiently accurate, or we have enough confidence in the accuracy to use this, right? And good data collection at this stage really avoids big mistakes later. And so, just think about when you're collecting your data, you want to make sure that you're not overestimating, underestimating, because you might end up setting targets that are difficult to achieve, or you miss easy opportunities and easy wins. So the data collection is quite critical at this point. So, I mentioned that why it's quite critical, and how to some questions to think about. Without good data, your roadmap can really, struggle or go into some challenges. So a good baseline, again, helps us track progress and set realistic targets. Granular data detail, for example, if you have higher resolution of data, for example, energy consumption in terms of your buildings, you might be able to get it in terms of macro level data, but if you can get it down to a resolution of what type of buildings are contributing to the energy consumption, that makes your roadmap stronger. And so, good data leads to better results, right? So definitely think about your starting point as well. Does your council have recent data that you can already use? And if it's not, this is what you have to collect. And remember that it's not just a technical task, because it really is the foundation for all the things that follow your roadmap, basically. So just some recommendations, and we've already touched on a few of them, so you can kind of already guess what I'm going to say. But basically collaborate, right? With agencies, universities, utilities. Sometimes there's open source data, and so you can collaborate with organizations collecting that as well, or peer city data. Peer city data would be, like data that are coming from peer cities as well, that you can also take a look at to see whether yours are making sense. Use reporting platforms, and we have one ICLEI track as an example of a platform that can offer you best practices and technical assistance and more recommendations. Sometimes you're going to have to, like I said, like estimate or extrapolate data, and this is extremely challenging to do, but having more data points always gives you a better chance of understanding the patterns in the data. And so peer city data actually can give you an idea of whether your data has enough confidence and significance in accuracy. And then definitely engage stakeholders. So effective communication helps to identify some useful parameters, right? So like I said, like if you have more data points, that just means more information that you can draw from. So thinking about some important questions to think about: are we working alone? Are we able to collaborate across departments and agencies? Do we have reporting platforms or tools that we can already use to help us? Are we balancing the need for data with also privacy and protection laws? And this is quite important to remember as well. And sometimes we don't have perfect data. And like I mentioned, you might have to estimate and extrapolate data. Can we estimate use data from similar cities? But you do have to make sure that you have a confidence level that you can comfortably work with. So moving on to the next step, which is to analyze and develop. And here is where, we want to come up with an SET, our sustainable energy, transition map. And we want to see how we want to kind of imagine a future scenario for ourselves as well, based on the data that we've collected and the political commitments and targets that we have. So what does this mean in practice, right? And so it means we need to look at a lot of the different factors: how much energy we need, where it's coming from, how efficient our current systems are, how much it will cost us in different scenarios, how it affects the social and economic situation of our community. So this is slightly different from before. We're talking now about modeling and scenarios, and we're addressing the same things, but we're thinking about potential situations here. So without this step, we're basically planning blind. So modeling allows us to visualize the different possibilities. For example, what happens if we invest in solar? What happens if we focus on energy efficiency first? So in this step, what you're trying to do is you're trying to analyze all the data to develop models where you can test different possibilities or different scenarios and visions that you have. So this is to avoid mistakes and choices that don't fit our local reality. So this is where we build out the model of the city's energy system. And you can think about it like running a simulation. When you build a bridge, you want to understand what happens if you shift like a percentage of energy to solar. What possibilities are there in terms of efficiency, storage, and very critically, how much is this going to cost us in the long run, right? So we're trying to make sure that we don't make expensive choices that are not workable. So we need to be creating a real world model that's based on our targets, based on our boundaries, based on our data collection that is coming from our local realities on the ground. So it's not, our energy systems models are planning tools. And again, they're helping us outline possible futures. So it's not about predicting the future perfectly, because no model is 100% accurate, because it is still in essence quite a model, but it's about exploring possible pathways based on your best case scenario of your data collection and assumptions. So, some scenarios to think about. One is a business as usual scenario. So what that means is basically, if you don't do any interventions, you don't change anything, it basically shows us, what will happen if we change nothing. And this is usually our business as usual scenario, what we're trying to compare against, because it makes a case for action, right? So then, you want to create scenarios for the future, and then you want to create, kind of compare them to the business as usual scenario. Now, the key thing here, when you're talking about, the purpose of energy systems modeling, is the model will depend on the quality of data and assumptions we put in. So basically, whatever quality of data you put in is the quality of output that you get out of it, right? And it's about understanding how our choices are going to play out. So we have our business as usual, and then we have alternative scenarios around what happens if we adopt different technologies, what happens if we adopt different policies. So it's to give us evidence to convince our stakeholders and other stakeholders around us of what is realistic and beneficial as well. And it's not a I just want to say that a model is not a silver bullet, right? It's meant to guide us, and our implementation will always depend on many real world factors that may or may not have been included in our models, but we'll try as best as possible to include as many things. But it gives us a snapshot, right? And it may not predict some major shifts in technology or economic shifts. And so you actually need to be constantly revisiting and updating the model over time as well. So choosing the right software tool for modeling is also quite critical. Not all tools are appropriate. You have to think about like what you're planning for. You're planning for city level, community level. So certain tools that are used in city, in energy level modeling, there's one called ComMod, which is, optimizes entire city energy systems, accounting for down to an hourly demand resolution. That's one that I'm just going to mention. But there are others out there. There's one called Energy Plan, which is widely applied for national transition planning, and some of you may already have heard of these tools, or you might already be using tools of your own. So this slide shows you basically, regardless of the software tool that you use, the process of energy modeling, and so how inputs are processed and translated into useful outputs. And so 3 parts really: the input, the process, the output. The inputs, usually in terms of some of the more commonly used software for city level planning, the inputs are in detailed demand profiles. So especially for electricity, and then there's technology options, costs as well. So costs of technology, renewable potential as well. Like, so what's your potential for generation and supply, and then some climate data is usually required as well. So the model is meant to take these demand profiles and try and, the process will be basically trying to find the cost optimal mix of technologies that meet your goals, while keeping within the constraints and boundaries of what you've put in. So for example, maybe you have a boundary on, you have no energy imports, and so everything is coming from within the system. And you want to have a minimum of, a percentage like 50% renewable energy share. And so the process will be constraining these and trying to take the inputs and optimizing. and basically spitting out recommendations as outputs on capacity, operation, costs, and transition steps as well. And again, like this, gives us the evidence base to make sound decisions and to convince other stakeholders around this as well. So once we've done our analysis and modeling, then we move on to the next step, which is implementation strategies and mechanisms. And now, so we shift from the data collection and the modeling and analyzing it to planning. So basically, once we have our idea of, the constraints of our systems, what's possible, what's not, then we move to a planning mode, right? So this step defines how we will achieve our targets. So, we set strategic objectives. Is it going to be around emissions, cutting emissions, cost savings, improving reliability? So we have to start with some strategic objectives here. We identify financial land use policy mechanisms that can also make it happen. This is where we define what we will actually want to do. And so, setting strategic objectives, outlining actions, and then looking at the constraints of these like financial, land use policy, economic factors to make sure that the plan is realistic. And so, without this step, the best model will just remain a model. And so we need to now translate that model into a plan for what we really want to create, right? So the roadmap, creating this roadmap and this plan will help us answer the questions of how do we implement our sustainable energy, our transition roadmap. And it's not just a document. I think one thing when I think about a roadmap is it becomes a shared agreement on action that everyone can use together and collaboratively. And so it gives us local strategies, some broad directions to follow, but specific actions and concrete steps. And then as well as a timeline so that everybody is on the same page with when we're trying to achieve what and by when. It should also detail out roles and responsibilities of who does what. So some accountability, knowing stakeholder scope within this plan. And then as well as very critically, some monitoring mechanisms as well, because it's really important to know how we're going to check our progress. So we need to understand how we're going to also monitor, our roadmap and make sure that we're on track. And this also makes us think about our resources, of course, our financial resources, human resources, technical, and where to get them, right? So it's really without these clear responsibilities and timelines, just thinking about it, even the best strategies will fail, right? And I just wanted to I think highlight here that our roadmap should always reflect values. It must reflect values of justice, equity, inclusion. With the city councils, you're representing and working with and in service of and for the people, the communities, right? And so it must reflect your values and promote cooperation across the departments. Across your energy, transport, housing, finance, there needs to be this shared value and roadmap. And with this as well, you can more easily plan for monitoring and regular updates because and you have to like I mentioned, you have to have the monitoring to track your progress, but also because changes as time goes by, technology, costs, and priorities might change. And so the monitoring and regularly updating your roadmap and your tracking it's critical to reflect these changes as well. So you want to be able to promote cross-departmental cooperation, progress monitoring of tracking how you're doing, and then periodic revision because things can definitely change. And so just a quick prompt here because I've been talking a lot and I would like everyone to also kind of chime in. I won't be able to see it coming in, but Chris and Rick might see it, and then later we can come back to it. Is as you think about your own councils and your own work, do you have a framework or tool currently that helps your different departments work together? And I would love to hear stories from your experience. So please, if you have stories around how your different departments work together already, especially on energy and energy efficiency issues, please feel free to share it in the chat, and we can kind of take a look later together. So definitely, in all of this, there will be challenges. And I think one of the more critical ones that I mentioned earlier was the data limitations. But you also have, financial constraints, which I'm sure many people always think about. This is always on the topmost of like everybody's minds. Land use conflicts, economic viability concerns, policy barriers. And really, I mean, we can try to think about like addressing or overcoming this with improving some of our data collection methods, and especially around building partnerships to improve the data. Because sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of us are collecting data, but we're in our silos, right? So we can build out these partnerships and collaborations. Diversifying finance sources. So exploring, I think this is something that we actually explored in our workshop last month, exploring blended finance and different partnerships, public-private, civic-public, private partnerships as well. So an extra stakeholder there. Another thing is to engage stakeholders early, bringing them into the whole effort very early on. I mean, this always increases buy-in and commitment, and just ensures that you have this cooperation early on. As you highlight long-term benefits, and then advocate for supportive policies, and then also focus on co-benefits as you're engaging with everyone, right? Co-benefits of this SET, you are trying to focus on better jobs, better air quality, health, and you share this as well with the public to build public support. So I think like fostering these partnerships and then sharing this very early on, and really focusing on the co-benefits. And I think, yeah, foreseeing these challenges really helps us to plan for them. And so you want to also be thinking about all the challenges that you might foresee that might, come in, and try and anticipate them. Because it's always better to have them in the plan rather than be surprised later on, right? So you want to make sure that you carry this out early in your planning. So finally, the last step would be to as finalizing the process. And so once the roadmap is ready, you want to validate it. So basically, this means that you want to engage stakeholders to see whether it makes sense. And then you want to communicate it to your communities, and for transparency, but also, like I mentioned, to attract buy-in, cooperation, visibility, as well as the resources for implementation. So the more you communicate your plans and it becomes more visible, the easier it is for those out there with resources to partner and collaborate with you. The validation builds trust, and the communication ensures that everybody knows the way forward and is able to help attract, the support and the funding that's needed for these efforts. A plan that isn't shared or understood will struggle to be implemented. And so this is to, produce your final roadmap and to validate and to communicate it. So I'm going to pause for just 5 minutes, and then maybe actually I wanted to take a look at the chat to see whether there's any sharing so far on the question that I just shared in terms of in your local city councils and your spaces, do you already use frameworks and tools for collaborating with each other? But otherwise, this serves a little bit as a short, break just before I move on to the next section. And please, yes, you can also put your questions in here as well. And we will definitely have a chance to respond to them. I'm going to respond to questions that are directly linked to this section, just so that we can kind of stay in the topic for now. So I will sort of be looking through the questions, and if there's more general questions, we'll save that for the Q&A later. I hope that's okay. Okay. So I don't see any sharings yet, but there's many of us on the webinar today. So please do feel free to share if you want to share your own experiences. Okay. Phew. Okay. I hope that was a short break, and now we can move on to the next section. And some of the questions here that are more, well, they're not general, but they're not specifically to the road mapping. I'm going to keep it for later during the Q&A, so don't worry, like some of these questions, we will actually do it a little bit. All right. Okay. Okay. So we're going to move on to the next section of the presentation right now, which is the practical part. So how do we take all that strategic level planning and deliver a project on the ground? And this is where, we turn the ideas into practice. So we're going to walk through a project development cycle. And I think this is essential for city councils to think about, especially as you get these projects on the ground. And even if you're not doing all the technical work yourself, but just an idea of the overall basics of project development. Okay. So the full picture here, and we think about it in terms of 8 stages of project development. And I'm going to just walk you through them briefly before we go into each one in more detail. So the first one is identification. What's the problem that we're trying to solve, and where is the opportunity? I think that's really like the high level view of it. Number 2 is expert engagement. So who do we need on our team to explore the options that we're looking at in terms of the problems that we're trying to solve, and also the opportunities. Number 3 is to assess options. What are the possible solutions, and how do we choose the best one? Number 4 is early project finance. Can we get some initial budget commitments? Number 5 is to demonstrate feasibility. Can we prove that this project is doable, both technically and financially as well? Number 6 is to secure funding. So can we lock down the full funding package for this whole project and effort? Number 7 is procurement. How do we appoint contractors or partners that we will work with? And then number 8 will be mentoring. So how do we make sure that monitoring, sorry. How do we make sure that the project actually delivers what we plan? So, we talked about tracking earlier, but this within the context of implementing the project development, how do we actually track that and make sure that it delivers exactly what we're working towards with the roadmap and the plan. So this life cycle is, or the stages of project development is meant to help us improve the planning, reduce risks, and secure buy-in. And it's extremely important, especially when we're dealing with, public trust and public funds. And so there has to be a very clear sort of life cycle in terms of our project development. So in terms of key roles for project development life cycle, so this shows us who does what in the early stages. And so identification, the local government or city council will usually lead. And, within this context or this project context, and you get to define your needs, right? What are your priorities? For example, is your priority to reduce fossil fuel use? Is it to improve efficiency in buildings? Is it to improve street lighting? So basically, this identification is, these roles are critical for this step of like this stage of identification. These expert engagement, you bring in the consultants, engineers, financial experts to help you design the project. And then, we went through these other things here. But the key roles here is, you have to have these consultants, engineers, financial experts. So at this point, I think you need to have clear communication across all your different departments to make sure that you're aligned as you're carrying out this stage. And then stages 5 to 8, you want to demonstrate your feasibility. Your experts do the technical and financial studies, energy modeling, cost benefit analysis. And then in you securing your funding, this is where formal agreements come in. And so you have your grants, loans, your PPPs, and we kind of covered some of this in the previous workshop as well. As in terms of what specifically are the steps in terms of when you're looking at financing. For procurement, you tender, hire, or partner within a private sector, or sometimes you also have partners within other sectors as well, but typically within the private sector. And then for monitoring, your team tracks performance. Also very critical to track, are your contractors meeting obligations? What are your KPIs, and are your KPIs being hit? And again, I'm just going to reiterate that, all of this is extremely important to ensure accountability and ensure that when you're using public funding, you're maintaining public trust in carrying out these projects as well. And here's where I think, this was when I see this, is like, here's where a lot of projects actually fail before they start. If we don't properly define the problem and the context, right? And so some questions to ask ourselves: what are our cost structures? Public, private spending, like what costs are currently being incurred? What volumes are we dealing with as well? In terms of energy use, waste, water. Earlier we did our data collection, and I was like kind of stressing on when we do our data collection, one thing to think about is how much is a lot, how much is little. And so what are our current volumes? What sites do we have? What programs or funding models already exist? So, I just wanted to also say that sometimes or oftentimes this work is passed on to consultants, but actually having the internal capacity within local city councils and governments, you actually have, if you're able to have this in-house, it's not just about reducing consultancy costs, but you actually are able to link your work across, the different experience that you currently have within the team. And so you sometimes get better value if you're able to also be able to check a lot of this internally as well. Right. And then when engaging experts, you definitely want to ask yourself, do we have the budget for this? How complex is the project as well? Can we write a good terms of reference, TOR, for this? Do we have the local human resources, local experts available? And so you would definitely have to, in your TOR, define the minimum skills you need to make sure that you're definitely attracting those with the required skills. And then you want to set very clear deliverables and specify how you're going to evaluate the bids. And this is to make sure that those who are submitting proposals are able to respond to to your needs and your requirements. And then, if you're, this is just something to think about. If your budget is tight, you could consider phased contracts as well, like having your project broken down in phases, and you can hire, for different phases, stage 1 first, and then options for stage 2 later. And this is useful if you have a project that's extremely complex and a tight budget as well. So once you have your experts, you want to be able to compare different project options and funding models. So is it going to be a grant? Is it going to be a loan? And then you want to be looking at your technical solutions. What technologies suit your volumes and your conditions? So before you already have an idea of how much, how big you want to make sure that your solutions are appropriate for this. You want to be able to run the numbers, quantify it. What will it cost? What are the benefits? And then you want to be able to rank your options. And in this, you can use multi-criteria tools that are, ranking according to affordability, complexity, environmental benefit, job creation, things that are critical to you. So I wanted to look at, so here you have a tool for matching funding models to your project risks and revenue profile. So this is, just an example of, low risk, a grant or a simple loan, higher risk, but with strong revenue, maybe some kind of private-public partnership, bonds, blended finance. So this is, just a simple sort of a matching tool. And so just as a key reminder that funding models must match both your project fundamentals as well as your legal frameworks. So not to forget, sort of like the broader legal framework that you also have to work within in terms of regulations and policies. So just a reminder to not forget that. And then here's another example of maybe how you want to rank your options. Oftentimes, affordability ranks quite heavily. Like, just as an example, here is a multi-criteria assessment approach. You've got a 50% weighted affordability, but you can adjust this based on your policy priorities, right? So this might be different for different situations. Other factors, technical complexity, environmental benefits. I mentioned job creation earlier. So these are all different weighted criteria that you can use when you're ranking your options. And why is this important? It's a clear, transparent process to build, political and community support. So this is transparency in how you're ranking the options so that you can build some buy-in and trust as well. So this is just an example of walking you through the previous example of how the multi-criteria approach came together. So in here, you've got option A is preferred because it's affordable, and affordability was given a high weight in the scoring. So this is illustrative. You have to adjust the weights according to fit your context. And you have to think about in your city or in your local government, would affordability always be the most important, or would some other criteria, weigh more, right? So this is just an example of walking you through how you could actually weigh the different things, what are, typically thought of in terms of affordability, technical complexity, job creation, environmental benefit. And so then it all comes together like this, and then you can kind of look at it and analyze it and make your decisions. So in the stage of early project finance, our main goal is to secure financial commitments that will give the project the green light to move. So this is really about aligning the interests of local governments, national governments or federal governments, and your development finance institutions, right? And it's important because, I just want to say that no matter how technically brilliant a project idea is without funding, it remains just an idea. And we need to de-risk the project enough to make it attractive to different players. So at this point, usually you want to be able to present your project assessments and seek financial commitments. First, looking internally, basically, are there internal budgets that you can use? Are there, instruments, debt instruments, grants, or anything that you can use? And then maybe from, at national level, you want to assess national grant mechanisms. You want to know the eligibility criteria, processes, limitations, and sometimes you tend to overlook some of these eligibility criteria and then later face delays, but you need to engage early to know the requirements, the criteria, so that you can make sure that you're able to meet all the requirements of these different mechanisms, funding mechanisms, and you can plan ahead. From DFIs or development finance institutions, this is where open discussions with partners need to be held, and you need to build out a relationship. So can they fund maybe project preparation? Can they help close funding gaps? You've already looked internally, you've looked at national level, and then now you're looking for some external source of funding here. One thing that I just wanted to say that, you should develop a really strong concept note that can really make or break the opportunity for support here. And one thing that I wanted to kind of bring up here as a reflection point is think about the funding assumptions that you're making, and are they realistic? So, sometimes what you need to do here is to kind of test it out as well. As you talk to stakeholders, try and find ways to assess whether they also find it realistic. And then try and engage very, very early on and not wait too late, right? So you have to assess, your assumptions and then sort of like your timelines and make sure that you're engaging people. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a bit of a, becomes a bit of a mantra. More data points are always useful to give you a better sense of what you're doing and whether what you're doing makes sense or not. And so one way to collect extra data points is also to be talking to people and to like getting feedback on your project concept and things like that. Now, demonstrating feasibility is where we start to move from, our ideas and our plan into the realm of reality, right? So what does feasibility mean? It means basically proving that the project is doable, technically, financially, socially, environmentally. And this is where, local government, your local government, financial departments, executives, private sector, and development partners must all work together to demonstrate feasibility here. So can the local government pay private sector for services? Are the social and environmental risks manageable? Is the business model sustainable in the long run? Like I mentioned before, you want to get some feedback on this, and this is part of really demonstrating your feasibility. So we need to be able to answer questions that funders will ask. Will, user fees or tariffs be affordable? How does this project align with wider agendas and development plans? I know a lot of time DFIs are they're taking cues from national level agendas and plans, and so you have to make sure that they're aligned. Are the benefits, jobs, emission reductions, how are they comparing to the costs as well? So you want to be able to ask yourself all of these things to see whether you're too focused on technical soundness without thinking about whether the project will also be bankable and fundable. So you have to kind of balance out your project planning to be thinking about realistically what is fundable. you know, just putting that out there, because I think sometimes, and I'm sure some of you have had experience with this, you see that a lot of times projects look good on paper, but they fail to attract funding, right? And this is because it's a really strong technical concept, but then you also need to balance that with bankability and how fundable, you know, the projects are. So breaking this down into steps, step number one is sites. We need to identify and secure land, confirm ownership, determine access rights. This may sound simple, but unclear land rights are a major cause of delays in infrastructure projects. So this is relating to you know, large scale or even small scale infrastructure projects which will require land. So in terms of demonstrating feasibility, these are some of the steps that you need to go through to make sure that you're able to do this. So step 2 is technical studies. This is about quantifying capital and operational costs and projecting revenues under different scenarios. So these figures help us test our assumptions. And then step 3 is modeling. So, you know, a good financial model calculates metrics like IRR, and cost to end users, but also needs to conclude on affordability. So if required, we model economic benefits as well, you know, carbon savings. This is actually something which we're seeing more and more. Increasingly, people are interested in more environmental and economic benefits. And then something here to just kind of as a key reflection. Are we engaging potential buyers of outputs early enough to validate our revenue forecast? So just thinking down the road of who are some of our end users and potential buyers, and are we also thinking about them? Are we testing enough different scenarios to ensure our numbers hold up also under scrutiny? So I think this is extremely important because we need to make sure that our financial model is also we have confidence in what's coming out of our financial model. And so if you're seeing some also sort of familiarity in planning and road mapping, that's because the steps are you know, you kind of tend to follow like similar planning steps, right? So step number 4, confirm funding model. So the model's outputs will help us confirm or reject our assumptions about feasibility. You need to have sensitivity analyses, test what happens if costs rise or revenues fall. If the model fails, we must be ready to explore alternatives. Step number 5, monitoring and evaluation criteria. So what will we monitor and evaluate? What indicators matter to funders? Is it greenhouse gas savings? Is it job creation? Your baseline data is useful here. And then step 6, reporting. Remember that funders want clear, focused reports, and you want to avoid reports with, you know, big, heavy documents that are heavy technically but difficult to read. So you need to maybe think about, you know, annexes for technical detail, but keeping the core report really sharp and insightful. And so you have to also be thinking as a key reflection here that you want to be preparing the reporting outputs that speak directly to funders' needs. So the step number 7 is procurement. And it's really how we formalize partnerships to deliver on projects. And depending on whether it is publicly owned and operated, or public with a service level agreement or PPP, the process will vary. And in publicly owned models, the focus is on appointing an EPC or an engineering procurement construction contractor. In PPPs, the process includes shortlisting, tendering, negotiating comprehensive agreements where private partners take on risk and responsibility. And And so I think a key reflection here, I mean, this is a quick summary of, something that we already covered last month, but I think a key reflection here is just, are our procurement documents clear, fair, and designed to attract, credible bidders? You want to be able to attract them. And have we factored in enough time for, especially with PPPs, it can be quite a complex process because you're negotiating a lot. And so have we factored in enough time? So these are, some things to think about as you're going through this process of procurement. And then we move on to the, monitoring, and we were talking earlier about how monitoring is about tracking. It's really about ensuring that you are keeping to your committed plan, right? So, or, simple words, you're ensuring that you're keeping your promises or your plan. And so whether it is a public project or a PPP, we need, independent engineers or monitoring mechanisms to verify work before payments are done, to make sure that everything is to our requirements and our plans. So in PPPs, you usually have penalties for non-performance, and those need to be clear and enforceable. And so that this protects public funding and ensures accountability, right? So just wanted to point that out. So really the key reflection here is, are our monitoring systems robust enough to be able to catch any issues early on? And do our agreements and our contracts in procurement, do they tie to actual performance? And can that be is that something that you can monitor, right? So that's really some of the key things to remember here. And I think, asking ourselves, why do so many good plans fail? And sometimes you just have barriers, right? And so you have barriers like you have limited institutional capacity, policy gaps, data issues, jurisdictional limits, technical challenges, and financial constraints. And I think that many of you here are well aware of these constraints and barriers, especially, I mean, more so than me, because you've actually done projects, not necessarily in energy or energy efficiency, but in other spaces, and you see these same barriers, right? And so I would like to actually ask here again, some barriers that you think about for implementation that you're facing in your local city councils, because I would love to really just also learn from this. I think the reflection here as you're thinking about your challenges and your barriers is to understand where are your projects most vulnerable in your local context, and are you proactively addressing them through your planning and your strategies, so that you will not be caught off guard later on. So I think this is the most critical thing to kind of think about here. And so finally, I think what's important to also remember as you're doing your roadmap and your strategic planning is first of all, what is success? But that's also linked to your targets, but what enables success as well. So, here is just some thoughts that we have on what enables success. Early and meaningful stakeholder engagement. And we mentioned strong political commitment earlier. A clear institutional setup in terms of roles, responsibilities, where different scopes end, where it begins. That's extremely important for implementation as well. The flexibility to adapt. Like I mentioned, you always have things changing, challenges will pop up. And so the flexibility to adapt to these changes with your roadmap and your implementation is extremely critical for success. Collaborative learning, so learning from each other, taking cues from successful projects, and then innovative financing as well. So making use of the full range, and that does mean going out to talk to different stakeholders to learn about the different financing options available to you. And I think that the key reflection here is, are we intentionally building these success factors into our process? Or, are we just hoping that they'll fall into place, which is which is a big no-no and against the sort of like the idea of like road mapping, right? So I think we want to be thinking about what are our enablers here for success, and are we very intentionally building that into our process? And so I think that's critical to be thinking of. So I've come to the end of the presentation, and I would really love to give space for question and answer, discussion, sharing as well. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen real quick and take a look at some of the chat. I'm sorry, I see here that we wanted to change the chat to, if it's possible, Chris, to change it to everyone.
Yep, yeah, they can talk with each other.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you. So I'm seeing a lot of questions. Not too much of sharing just yet, which is fine, because I mean I think it is quite difficult to share, across a remote platform like this. But if you feel so inclined to share the story in the chat, like would really love to hear from you. And I think one of the sort of like the questions that I have for you as we go into this is, when you look at efforts from your past experience, where do you think your city council can contribute most in terms of like sectors? Like, we were looking before at like buildings, transport, things like that. I'm kind of curious to hear about. And then I think, yeah, like, so what do you think some of your challenges are? So prompt here. I'm actually going to put it in the group chat. Actually, that might be easier. Is to hear from all of your experiences. Okay. Okay. As you kind of share some of that, I'm gonna just quickly take a quick look at the questions, if you don't mind, so that I can kind of just organize my thoughts around how best to answer it. And I see that there's some questions in the group chat as well. So I'm gonna try and pull that out if I can. Okay. Here. It's also a bit of a break after hearing my voice for a long period of time. And then I see some in the Q&A. I see some people sharing as well in the Q&A. Okay. Right. I see some of you sharing some experiences on challenges in political commitment, also data collection. Yep, that's always a good one.
I to chime in, Ayu, and to everyone, because there are some questions about the funding mechanisms, how they can, get funding for the projects. And ICLEI actually has a project preparation facility that is called the Transformative Actions Program, where we match the projects that you have from inception up to the implementation. So it varies, and I think it's better if I share it with you, the transformative
Sure.
action program. Yeah, I think
I am ready to answer some of these questions. So I'm just like quickly just organizing them for myself.
okay.
Maybe I'll answer them real quick and then you can go into that, if that's okay, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to try and attempt to answer all the questions. And I apologize if I kind of miss anything. So I think one question that was from a few different people were about does energy carbon offset certificates being purchased by developed countries reinforce net zero targets for the future? And I think there's a question about whether it's ethical as well. And it's an important and timely question. And I think that carbon offset certificates, I think when they're designed and governed well, it can play a real role in helping, countries meet net zero commitments. But it becomes ethically questionable if they're being used to avoid actual emissions reductions, especially at source, right? So there's a risk of where developed nations will effectively buy their way out of hard transitions by relying on projects in less developed countries without delivering meaningful change at home, right? And it's critical that carbon markets are transparent, verifiable, and accountable, ensuring that offsets are additional, meaning that they result in carbon reductions that wouldn't have happened otherwise, right? And equally important is ensuring that benefits flow equitably to local communities involved in the offset projects with safeguards against exploitation. So I think Malaysia is exploring voluntary carbon markets, and we should watch closely how these frameworks evolve to ensure that they truly support both domestic and global climate goals, rather than just providing a convenient accounting tool, which I think what we're bringing this up as a major concern, right? So it's definitely fair. And then this leads into, I think, the other question around are carbon taxes unfair to developing countries? And so definitely, yes, it's a valid concern. And carbon taxes, if applied without consideration for context, can definitely disproportionately affect developing economies, especially where industries or communities have fewer alternatives to carbon intensive activities, right? But carbon pricing, including taxes, like I said, it can be a valuable tool if designed carefully. So if revenues from carbon taxes could be reinvested in helping communities transition, supporting energy efficiency, distributed renewables, improving public transport, the key is equity in design, right? So while we don't yet have a national carbon tax, there's growing conversation about pricing mechanisms, and I think it's essential that we ensure these are there to design to protect vulnerable groups and to support low carbon development pathways rather than just unnecessarily adding burden, right? And I think one more thing that I wanted to kind of add on with funding and financing, not super directly related to this, but just looking at the questions, I think that this might be of interest. The International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA, is working on a current report right now that looks into investments in renewables globally, but breaks them down not according to where they're coming from, where they're going, but actually looking into impact-based investment. And because they have brought up the fact that a lot of investment, like over 80% of renewable energy investment, are only benefiting a very small number of developed nations. And this is, speaking to the unjust, like equity, question here. And so that report is meant to try and shift some of that narrative that right now we're seeing these very positive numbers in investments in renewables. But if we look at the problem more closely and analyze it, it's not an equitable distribution of wealth and benefits, right? So just following this sort of this theme of like what's just, right? I think there's a question also on how can we prevent monopolization of the RE industry? I think, again, this falls back to very strong like regulatory frameworks and a focus on participation from small and medium-sized enterprises, cooperatives, communities. This does not necessarily exist yet in Malaysia, but we're actually working very strongly to do this. For example, our organization is involved with a rural electrification effort in Sabah to include, participation from communities directly, which typically does not exist in regulation right now. Like, communities are not able to own their own systems, but we're working on changing that so that for distributed energy, they can. We've also seen net energy metering, solar leasing schemes open up opportunities beyond big players. And definitely there's more to be done, setting, quotas aside for community projects, simplifying approvals, financing support for smaller entities. But I think that we're on our way, and it's really about creating a level playing field, right? So that we can ensure that the transition is not just green, but also fair. There's a question on how can we tap climate adaptation and mitigation funding for RE and community development. This is a great question, and actually something that our organization holds very very dear to our heart, like actually something that we work on every single day. Because, and it's a powerful thing because climate finance often focuses either on mitigation or adaptation, but community energy projects can address both, right? And to tap into these funds, proposals need to clearly articulate the co-benefits and make the explicit link between these projects and climate. How can mini grids not just reduce emissions, but builds resilience to climate-related issues, right? And especially for off-grid communities, which is where our organization normally works, this is the climate resilience issue here is very critical because our off-grid communities are really the front lines, right, of climate. So development partners like Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund, they are increasingly looking for projects that combine both these benefits. But in practice, I think it requires really strong project preparation capacity. And this is something which I think, partners and stakeholders can support each other on in terms of stronger partnerships to build that capacity to really take on these types of projects. There was a question on how many steps or approvals for a clean energy project there are in Malaysia. I think it can vary depending on the scale and type of project. But typically it's site approvals, land use permissions, energy commission licensing, environmental social impact assessments for larger projects, and then agreements with utilities, especially if it's grid connected. And then financing is separate. So there's like in just just off the top of my head, those kind of 4 things, but it definitely varies. But one of the challenges, as someone, I think, Nina, you pointed out, confirming land ownership, which can really delay projects. So efforts like a one-stop center for renewable energy are aimed at streamlining some of these processes, but we're definitely trying to improve them more. And then I think there was a question on how can rights holders be involved in donor negotiations? So this is, I think, in my mind, I'm reading this as coming from local communities and indigenous groups should be engaged from the earliest stages of project design. So I think if any of you work with local communities and indigenous groups, you would have heard FPIC, so free prior informed consent. That is a framework and a principle in terms of how you engage with communities. And so ensuring that all projects have FPIC, I think is really key. So their voices need to be included. They need to be informed of both the goals, delivery models of the project so that negotiations can reflect all local priorities. So, in practice, this means really requiring community consultations as a condition of donor financing, right? And building the participatory governance structures into the project design. So funders I'm noticing that they're increasingly doing this. But we need to be pushing it more so that it becomes standard, right? And becomes best practice in climate and development finance. I think there's a question on how can local governments leverage dashboards and real-time data for RE planning. That's really a cool question. I think digital tools like centralized dashboards can help local governments track energy demand, project performance, emissions in real time. It just allows for like really dynamic data-driven decision making, right? And I think in Penang and in Cyberjaya, some of our city pilots, smart city pilots have already begun integrating some of these tools for transportation and energy. So there's opportunity to scale these up and connect them to, your RE planning so that it becomes, instead of like ad hoc, sort of pilots, where we're actually integrating them, continuously learning and building on what's already happened so that we can just act faster and more effectively. So I think we can look at these different pilots and just kind of build them into our roadmaps, right? How can we prepare for potential environmental hazards? I think a good approach combines planning, risk assessment, capacity building. I think for RE, this means locating projects carefully to minimize vulnerability, environmental vulnerability, designing for resilience as well, elevated solar arrays, storm resistant, training local teams in emergency preparedness and response. I think we often kind of forget about the local technical capacity that is needed to also maintain a lot of these projects and sort of that capacity building. I think in Malaysia, we're increasingly factoring in climate resilience into our infrastructure planning. I know that a lot of effort with modernizing the grid is happening this, and we want this to be a standard for all projects. So yeah, I think these are all really really thoughtful questions. And I was trying to also kind of draw from our examples here in country, and then maybe some broader best practices, but I hope that kind of answered everything. Yeah. And then I think I'll hand it over to you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Ayo. That's very well done. And also, same here with us. We are also advocating for a just energy transition as well as the multi-stakeholder approach in all of our planning processes. So that's why everyone should be involved from the onset, right? And as mentioned by Ayo earlier, we should engage this our stakeholders early on so that they can have also like an ownership of what they are doing as they are participating in our activities, not just for us, for ICLEI, our partners, but also for in your local governments. So yeah, and as mentioned earlier, with regards to the financing options, ICLEI has a transformative actions program. Hope you can see it here. Here is the website for that transformative actions program. So this is a project preparation facility where we are accepting several uh, project proposals that we implemented, and we are matchmaking them to the different partners that we have. So this one, so the top call right now is open until September 30. So this call is open annually, but this one so that we can match your proposals to the possible funders. So I will share the link later on so maybe Chris can share this link to the chat, so you can directly and apply for the top call. The aims of the top is the top generating flows of cities, towns, and regions globally, transform local ideas into investment-ready projects. We support local and regional governments through project cycle, including early stage project preparation. So if you have like idea itself and then going on to what you have, even we prefer projects who already has a feasibility study. But for those who have not yet, but you know, if it's really a good idea in your locality, submit it. And the last one is to pursue and promote various financing sources and options to best fit a project and local circumstances. So for this one, how this works, we have the annual calls, as mentioned, the deadline is on September 30 this year. And then we are also screening it. We have the the scoring for this. And if you receive more than 80 points, what you have, then you move to the next step. But if you receive less than 80 points, we will bring back the proposal to you, like, hey, this one aside of your proposal, so that, as mentioned earlier, the core benefits of your project proposal is very important. So it should not just target one, just target mitigation only, target adaptation only, target the resilience of the communities only. It should uh, show the core benefits of your project proposal. So that's why there is this screening test for your project. So these are the numbers as of May 2024. So we have this improvements of the projects in this portfolio and about the cost of each possible uh, projects that could be funded. And then these are the 39 project proposals who were able to access funding. So more than that, knowledge products from TAP can help you better your project proposals as well. So this I will share this in the chat box so that you can check. You can also check the web page and other resources that we might have in ICLEI. So that's it. If you have more questions about this program that we have, reach out.
Thank you, Ayu, and thank you, Rick. Again, thank you to everyone for joining us for this webinar on renewable energy strategic planning. Just some final reminders and notes if you haven't seen the chat box yet. Again, to receive your certificate of attendance for this webinar, we kindly ask you to answer a short feedback survey. The URL is in the chat box and up there on your screen. You may also scan the QR code. The survey will also be emailed automatically to you within 1 day. So please expect an email from Zoom to get this link in case you miss it this morning. Again, thank you so much, everyone. Your feedback will be very valuable to helping us improve the conduct of future webinars, Renew Southeast Asia and beyond. Again, if you have not yet joined the Renew Southeast Asia Community of Practice, we highly encourage you to do so. You may scan the QR code below. You may also back read the chat box for the LinkedIn link. Here, you'll be able to network with like-minded professionals who are also interested or are currently practicing in the field of renewable energy. Again, we'll end early to give you all more of your time back for the day. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Please expect further communications from ICLEI Southeast Asia regarding the Renew Southeast Asia project. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye. This webinar room, it will automatically close in a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ayu.
Oh, okay.